Travis Patterson, and welcome to Driving Change. Here, you're going to find unfiltered insights and hard-hitting questions that challenge the status quo in law and in life. As a personal injury lawyer in Fort Worth, Texas, I see firsthand how challenges like distracted driving and family safety issues impact our community. But I refuse to accept problems as inevitable. In this podcast, we're going to dig deep into real-world problems, bringing you practical solutions from my experiences in law and in parenting and entrepreneurship. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to start conversations that make you think differently and provide actionable advice that you can use right away. Welcome to Driving Change. Let's get to it. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Driving Change, the Driving Change podcast. I'm super excited today. I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, actually kind of a hero of mine, a mentor of mine, Joel Feldman. Joel is, I think he's my only friend in Pennsylvania, actually. But Joel Feldman, he's great. He's been a lawyer for 40 years. I've got your bio here, Joel. I'm going to read a little bit about your story here because it's truly incredible. He's been a personal injury lawyer for about 40 years, did kind of the same work that I do here in Texas. But Joel had tragedy strike his family back in 2009 when his daughter Casey was killed by a distracted driver. This is when Casey was 21 years old. In fact, I was 22 years old, Joel, when this happened. I think, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I think this is one of the reasons why your story has resonated with me so much through the years. But since Casey's death, Joel has worked tirelessly to keep all of us safe across the country on the roads through the formation of End Distracted Driving, or NDD, which you will hear us refer to it as. Joel has personally given over 1,000 distracted driving presentations across the country to businesses, safety conferences, schools, anybody that will have Joel. Joel will show up for free and talk to the audience about distracted driving and will save lives. This presentation that he's built was done with the help of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. It's been studied by the U.S. Department of Transportation. They have deemed it to be a very highly effective presentation. It is evidence-based. It is scientifically guided. It's interactive. It gets the students talking. It speaks to them on their level. It's just a very persuasive and powerful presentation. I've had the honor of giving this presentation that Joel and his team built, I think 7 times now, Joel. Joel always gets on to me because I'm not good at keeping track of this kind of stuff, and he's always saying we got to write this stuff down. But I've done it 6 or 7 times to a couple thousand kids around Texas, and it's just been remarkable. It's very effective. I've done some very unscientific surveys after these presentations, and about 92% of the students say they are way less likely to drive distracted after seeing the presentation. So huge credit to Joel. Joel's got about 100 or so volunteers across the country doing these presentations. So I'm just one of many helping Joel out. The organization has talked to over 500,000 students across the country. Is that right, Joel?
Yes, 535,000 the last count.
Wow. Look, see, this is what I said. They keep track of all this stuff. He's on national boards, national committees on distracted driving. He is the tip of the spear on this issue in our country. So I'm super excited to get into it with him. Joel, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, Travis, thanks for having me. It's been a couple of months since I was down there, and we hung out and we spoke with those kids in the Dallas area.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Another deal. So, last year I did a presentation at a school, and CBS came with us, and they did they put it on the news, and then Dallas ISD reached out and said, "Hey, we've got 22 schools. Will you come to all of them?" And I called Joel. I was like, "How am I going to do this? I can't be in 22 schools." So Joel flew down and hit up a couple of the schools, and we put together a group of lawyers to tackle as many of these schools as we could in the time that we were allotted. But yeah, it was good seeing you in Texas, Joel, seeing you in person. You were wearing pink that day, I remember distinctly, and looks like you're wearing pink now. Tell folks why you wear pink all the time.
I wear pink whenever I do talks, whenever I do anything related to distracted driving, because pink was my daughter Casey's favorite color. There are many things we do to remember Casey, but that's just one thing I do. It makes me feel connected. And also, pink water bottle.
Pink water bottle. I love
pink
it.
Water bottle, yeah.
All right, so let's start with Casey. Tell us about Casey, about who she was, what she was into, and just the kind of future she had. Of course, I didn't know her personally, but I've learned her story a lot. But yeah, talk about your daughter.
Well, Casey was my oldest child. I will tell people today that I have two children, but only one is still living. As you said, Casey was killed by a distracted driver back in 2009. Just briefly, the facts were she was walking to her summer job. She had a summer job at the New Jersey beach. She wanted a fun summer between her junior and senior years of college in New York City. And she was walking to her job. It was a beautiful summer day. She was about three-quarters way through the intersection. And a 58-year-old man, not a kid, a 58-year-old man was distracted by his GPS. He looked away from the road. He rolled through a stop sign. His truck literally ran Casey over. She did survive for a little while, and maybe we'll get into that later. But we got the call to go to the hospital. We waited and waited and waited, and then two doctors came into the room. And as I tell people, they didn't even have to tell us that Casey was dead. We just looked at their faces and we knew that she was dead. And everything changed in our lives, as it would for anyone who's listening here who has children, has a loved one who is killed in a traffic crash. Everything changes. Casey was she was really wonderful. She kind of had the goods on her dad. She would remind me what I'm doing wrong. She would she'd also say, but mostly in middle school, that I was the person in the world who embarrassed her more than anyone else.
Yeah,
and I wear that title proudly. And
sure.
I think as a dad, that's what we're supposed to do with our daughters. But anyway, I was good at it.
Yeah.
She'd often remind me. She'd say, "Have you reached out to your brother? Have you talked to grandma?" That kind of stuff. She was very, very family oriented.
Yeah, girls, they kind of are the glue of the families, aren't they? They kind of remind the guys to start talking. And yeah, Casey, I've seen some videos that your family's put together over the years with her friends talking about being friends with Casey and then what they've learned with what happened to her. And when I go into these high schools, I always start talking about Casey because I said this all started because of her, obviously. I said, Casey just sounds like that kind of person that a lot of people said, like, that was my best friend. Like, she had very special, close relationships, it seemed like, with a lot of, young women and others. And it just seems like she was just an amazing young lady. And I tell you this all the time, but my heart always goes out to you and your wife and your son for what you guys lost.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about that. A lot of folks said that she was her best friend. We knew she had one or two best friends. But afterward, or at least that was our impression, but after she was killed, three different young ladies came up to me, in addition to the ones that we thought were her best friend, and they said that Casey was their best friend. And I just asked why. And two of them said, well, because I could tell Casey really awful stuff about me, and she would never judge me. Never judge me. She was always there to support me. And actually, one of those friends is battling cancer now, one of her friends. So.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that. So after you lost Casey, so at this time, take me back to 2009, Joel. You're a personal injury lawyer is it Philadelphia at the time?
Yes.
So you're representing people. So cell phones weren't huge back in 2009. I wasn't practicing law yet. I mean, were you seeing a lot of distracted driving cases in your career at that point in time?
Well, as I know that you've been very much on this issue in terms of distracted driving, but you, unlike a lot of other folks, recognize that there's things other than cell phone use that constitute distracted driving. So, yeah, I had a case where, and this is testimony from a deposition. The defendant truck driver, I asked him what happened, and he basically held his hands up like this, and he said, I was holding a steering wheel. I went by a 7-Eleven, and I saw a really hot girl in tight shorts, and I turned to watch her. My truck went over the double yellow line and hit your client's car and killed their 4-year-old son. I had another case back then where a young woman was eating yogurt. She was trying to steer with her knees. She had the yogurt container in one hand, the spoon in the other, and she paralyzed my 17-year-old client. So there were phone cases as well, but not like it is today.
Not yeah,
Not like
right.
it is today. But we should not lose track of that. There are lots of other things in addition to phones that can distract drivers.
I've had I've had distraction from just looking at somebody who just caught their attention or didn't fit the neighborhood and they were just staring at somebody. I've had those cases. I've had eating while driving cases. I've had makeup cases, putting on makeup while driving. Reaching for stuff in the back seat, reaching for kids. So yeah, there's all sorts of distracted driving circumstances besides just cell phones. Cell phones, obviously, we're seeing a lot more of today. But you've been dealing with distracted driving in your job as a lawyer for a long time, and then after Casey died, tell me about that time period. How when did your organization start, and when did you start kind of committing more time to the cause?
Oh, and we've talked about this when we met, Travis, that, uh, there are lots of folks who are personal injury attorneys, and probably the folks listening see ads on TV and all, and they may not know personal injury attorneys. But one of the really neat things about it is the relationship you build with your client. And I know you're the same way. Before Casey was killed, I had represented a number of families who'd lost children. And some of those families set up foundations with the money that we obtained from settlement. And so it was something that I had seen before. So it was, I don't know if it was the back of my mind, the front of my mind, but I was driven. Casey hadn't graduated school. She hadn't found a job, a career, hadn't married. Didn't have children. How would this wonderful young woman be remembered? And I thought it was my job to do something to remember her. And that's why I was just looking at some corporate legal papers the other day. It was a month to the day after Casey was killed that I went into the local court and I opened up an estate in Casey's name. It was a month.
A month. So is that when end distracted driving started?
No, we opened up the foundation. I knew at the beginning that I wanted to do something with respect to the way she died. Um, it took a little bit of time to find out exactly what the driver was doing. You know,
Right.
it's pretty obvious that someone who runs through a stop sign in broad daylight, there's something going on. And they weren't speeding. There's no drugs or alcohol involved. So yes, we knew that the driver was not paying attention, equal distraction. But it took a little bit of time. So I think I did my first talk. Casey was killed in July of 2009. I think I did my first talk in February of 2010.
Oh wow. So it hadn't even been 12 months. That's I mean that in and of itself is incredible. You know I try not to, but sometimes I put myself in your shoes. I'm like, well, if I had gone through something like this, I don't think I would be able to get out of bed probably for the rest of my life. And you have taken this tragedy, and obviously, I know it, and everybody who's seen the presentation knows it. You know, I just want to applaud you for the response to the tragedy because you have saved hundreds and hundreds of
Well,
lives.
I appreciate that. We don't know what we're capable of until something happens. And I remember before Casey was killed, the toughest cases I've had, and I'm sure you've had these too, would be representing parents whose kids were killed. Awful cases. I mean, you think about it. When each of us gets older um, and live hopefully full lives, our children bury us.
Yeah.
It's not the natural order of things for parents to bury their children. And I can tell you that as sympathetic as I was, as understanding as I was with parents, try to be understanding. Um, Being an observer of someone else's grief is vastly different from suffering that unimaginable loss yourself. So my world was shaken. Um, and, there's studies and things. You could look this up. There's something called post traumatic growth. People who do suffer trauma, some of those folks, and I'm fortunate that I'm one, do make changes in their life and they become actually stronger people in different ways, gain purpose for life, a greater appreciation for life, more connections. I mean, I got through my daughter's death. I get through anything. I could get through anything now.
Yeah. Well, you're one resilient person. Let's talk about the indistracted driving presentation, and what the group does. What does it do? Who does it speak to? How does this work? What is the cause of, I mean, obviously it's in the title, indistracted driving, but tell us about its mission. Tell us about what that organization is doing, week in and week out.
Yeah, we're personal injury attorneys. We're used to crashes. We're used to seeing people suffer horrible injuries. We're used to representing the families of those who've been killed. So, and we're comfortable speaking with people. So I felt comfortable. I look back on it, and I didn't know what I was doing when I first did talks. It was sort of like, I don't know if it was ego or whatever, saying, okay, my daughter's dead, killed by a distracted driver. I could just go into a school and talk about distracted driving.
Yeah.
I
Right.
look back at it. Whew.
Yeah. My dad has a joke. Like, if you want to learn a topic really well, sign up to give a speech about it, and then
Yeah,
you'll be forced to
exactly.
learn it.
I agree with that 100%. Um, so I was probably after doing half a dozen presentations, and they seemed to go okay, that I said, you don't know what you're doing. So I reached out to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, literally in the backyard from where my office is. They do a lot of stuff. They were the kindest folks. I just happened to connect with a woman, Flora Winston, who's a medical doctor, an engineer, one of the best researchers in the country for teen issues. And she kind of took me under her wing, said, hey, we'll help you develop a distracted driving presentation. But there's one condition. She, being a researcher, said, we want to create pre-presentation surveys to give to the kids, post-presentation surveys, so we can measure change and we can make changes to the presentation to make it as effective as possible.
Well, oh, okay. Wow.
I said, sure.
I didn't realize that was
Yeah.
happening early on.
Oh, really early on. And I think I was very fortunate in that regard because it put me into this mindset that you have to pay attention to whether or not you're making change. You have to pay attention to whether or not you're improving or changing attitudes and behaviors. And it's the only way really to know whether or not you need to change something. Just think about it. At the end of a presentation, you ask kids, well, what did you think? What did you think? What are they going to say to you?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not
They're
too
gonna be
many
nice.
kids are going to say, hey, that really sucked, pardon
Yeah.
my language, but they're not going to say that. Um, so if with this thing, it's clinical, it's removed. So that was really, really helpful. I was introduced to experts who are what they call behavior change experts. Not surprisingly, there's studies about why people change, what helps them change attitudes and behaviors. And I was introduced to that whole field of literature and research, and I still pay attention to that. But there are a lot of theories behind our presentation, and there's a lot of theoretical and actual practical backing for it. And if we have time, we can go into that.
Yeah. I think that's important for, like, if you're a high school administrator, listening to this. The presentation it is scientific, and like as Joel said, it's been proven to be effective. That's so important. It's not it's not a personal injury lawyer walking into your gymnasium and saying, hey, if you've been injured in a car accident, call me for a free consultation. Like, Joel has a very strict rule. You do not. There's no plugs. There's no mention of any of that kind of stuff. It is, hey, let's get in there and let's get to work. Let me talk to you about distracted driving and how it's affecting our community. We all get calls as personal injury lawyers across the country on this thing all the time. But we can do something about it, and it starts with these high school students. So I don't know about you, but that's been some of my resistance. They don't say that, but I just feel like sometimes, the schools, I don't know if we want a lawyer coming to speak to all these kids, but I'm like, no, it's it's going to be great. I promise you. It's free. It takes like an hour, and it's going to save a life, and it's going to save someone's conscience who might go and cause one of these accidents in their future.
And what you just said is really, really important because I have worked with probably, I have 125 volunteers. Quite honestly, there's probably about 40 to 50 that I've actually worked with and know. I mean, I've been on an email with the rest, but I don't really know them, to be honest with you. But there's something about, saving lives. And again, you think about it, someone might say, well, that's against your interest as a lawyer. You want there to be more crashes and all, but no, it's not like that. It's you feel good about doing it, and I would say probably 60-70% of the schools are interested to know that it has been studied, and updating. Since that time, Children's Hospital did it. They issued a paper. They said it was effective, but they said it was deficient in some ways, and we started to change that. Fast forward 2022, the U.S. Department of Transportation asked if they could create some new surveys around our presentation and study it. Of course, I said yes. 2023, 2024, they did it. And we just got another one back from not the U.S. Department of Transportation, but someone else. And we're getting the presentation better and better and better. I am not a statistics guy. If there's folks listening who are into statistics, forgive me, because what you're going to hear is not really very detailed. But they found that it's statistically significant changes in changing attitudes about distracted driving, and actually some of the kids' behaviors, and which was really unexpected, but a great surprise, many of the parents of the kids,
Yep.
pre to post, had also reduced their distracted driving because their kids got on their case. So that was pretty cool too. So it's good to know that we have that. And if I'm asking people to do the presentation, to volunteer their time, because no one gets paid, I want to be able to promise them that it's the best presentation out there.
Absolutely. And yeah, and you're awesome because you know you're not an ego guy. Your whole thing is how can this presentation be as most effective as possible, and you put that above everything else, because you know you're honoring Casey and you're saving lives at the same time. So it's just an amazing presentation. Let's talk about this, the issue, right? Distracted driving. Okay, it is now 2024. I kind of joke with people sometimes that, yeah, cars are getting smarter, but it seems like people are getting dumber at a faster rate. So our roads are more dangerous than ever. So Joel, you tell me from the statistics, even though you just said you're not a statistics guy, but just how big of a problem is distracted driving? Just how dangerous is it? And when I say distracted driving, let's talk about what we see today a lot, which is people texting and driving, or people jacking around on social media while driving.
Yeah, it's texting, it's social media, it's changing the music, it's and hopefully we'll be able to talk about this, but it's programming the GPS while you're driving.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of using the GPS. I fly all across the country. I rent cars. I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah.
GPS is wonderful, but that's a task related to driving. But you want to program it while you're stopped. So if you go on the U.S. Department of Transportation's website and you look, you'll see that since Casey was killed in 2009, we've hovered around 3,000, 3,100 deaths per year to distracted driving. That was always thought to be really underrepresentative of the real amount. There's several reasons for that. Compare it to drunk driving. We do not have a blood test that will confirm someone is driving distracted. You have a blood test for drunk driving. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's got to be well above 95, 96% of the cases. You can prove it.
Yeah, they don't always come out of the car admitting that they were staring at their cell phone.
Yeah, so what are the reasons why it's underrepresented? Unless you have a witness to the distraction, someone else who saw the driver, as you said, Travis, people don't hop out of the car and say, I'm really sorry I was texting. So what the U.S. Department of Transportation and NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, collect is they collect details from the states from crash reports. So whatever crash reports are filled out by the state that are tagged distracted driving, that's what they collect. That's what informs that 3,000, 3,100 per year number. So many states don't even have a box to check off on their crash report for distracted driving. It's less now, but of course, more and more are getting that, but they still don't have that option. Sometimes it's just as easy for the police officer, and I'm not being critical of police at all, because they've been great supporters of ours, and they have a real good job to do in terms of after a crash, but also prevention. Sometimes it's easier just to say vehicle ran off roadway, vehicle crossed center line, something like that. Sometimes they think it might be drowsy driving if the driver died. Why did they just go off the side of the road? Well, maybe they fell asleep if it's at night. So we knew that it was underrepresented. There were some studies that had been done that said it might be underrepresented by 40%. NHTSA released a report in February of 2023 titled something like The Economic Cost of Motor Vehicle Crashes. And what they did is they looked at data from an ongoing years-long study where they'd found thousands of people, they put cameras in their car, they instrumented their car, and they just have this incredible source of data. What is it? If there's a severe event, if there's a hard brake, a crash, a swerve, it'll preserve film. And they can look at, I think it's 10 seconds before the event, 10 seconds after. Now, it could be not a crash, it could be a crash, it could be a near crash. So they had researchers look at this, and after looking at that, they found that rather than that 3,100, which is about 8%, maybe 10%, depending upon the year of total traffic fatalities, the number was 29%. So today, we are very confident that we're killing at least 10,000, probably 11, 12,000 people a year based upon distracted driving. So that's a really, really big thing. You want to be able to show people how bad a problem it is. So in terms of the frequency and the toll, that's the number that we're using now. Greater than 10,000, just to be conservative.
Greater than 10,000 people are dying in our country from distracted driving a year.
Every year.
Every year. And I have seen this number is one of those numbers that sticks out to me, 23. You're 23 times more likely to be in a crash if you're texting while you're driving than if you're just driving normal. 23 is that's a big number, Joel.
Yeah, I think that number, if I recall, it came from a study involving commercial truck drivers. There were some issues with the study. I can't recall what it was. So I think most people now will say it's anywhere between 4 and 12 times. But I mean, that's still awful.
It's
awful.
Yeah, it's still terrible. I mean, we just know as an adult, just driving around, you see it. If you look over on the highway, and we'll talk about this kind of stuff, but you look over and you see someone staring at their phone, you kind of know that they're doing that before you even get up to them because they're swerving all over their lane. I mean, it's very obvious, and then, 5 minutes later, it's just crazy what we see on the roads, and we all know how dangerous it is. So what are we going to do about it, right? That's kind of what I like to think about. Teenagers. Let's talk about kids for a second. I saw in your presentation, I think it was the first time I saw this stat, that teenagers today are more likely to be killed by a distracted driver than a drunk driver. When I first learned that, it hit me, it just floored me, because when I was in high school, we heard about drunk driving all the time. We had Shattered Dreams back at my high school. I'm sure you're familiar with that program, Joel. They come in and they stage this crash, and they had the theater kids out there, draped all over these cars with fake blood all over them. And some of them were screaming. Some of them were pretending to be dead. And it was this big drunk driving thing. And I just remember, always heard about drunk driving and that sort of stuff. We didn't hear anything about distracted driving back then. This was in the, early 2000s, back when I was in high school.
Well, let me stop you there. Just think about that. All your listeners, if I asked you in the past 30 days, how many of you have driven drunk? Maybe a couple would say yes.
Yeah, if they're being honest.
It's not socially acceptable to drive drunk. I mean, and that's what you're talking about. As a kid, this was drilled into your head, drilled into my son's head and everything. And I'll admit, and I've admitted this before, that when I grew up, we would drive after drinking. My son can't believe it, but we would drive after drinking because we hadn't had these programs. MAD had just barely come along. The laws hadn't really been changed. And so people would have a couple of drinks for the road, so to speak. I mean, it's unbelievable to think about it, but it's so different. Now, if I'd asked your audience, how many of you have first been in a car in the past 30 days where your driver was looking at their phone or something, taking their eyes off the road, probably many of them would agree. And if I said, how about you? Probably lots of them would agree too. So, it's a totally different environment. Drunk driving is not socially acceptable. And clearly, based upon what you said, Travis, and your audience's own experience, it's not the same way with distracted driving, but we can get there.
Yeah,
I'm optimistic that we can get there.
Yeah, I am too. And what we're going to talk about today is how do we get there? So let's talk about why. Like, Joel, why do you think people drive distracted so often? Is it a boredom thing, or is it just I'm so addicted to my cell phone now, or I'm wondering what's going on in the social media? Is it that whole endorphin kind of thing, or why is everybody on their phone so much while they're driving, or otherwise driving distracted?
Well, I think we could ask ourselves, because unfortunately, most of us are experts when it comes to distracted driving because we've done it so much. And we didn't cover this before, but I drove distracted before Casey was killed.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
All the time.
Me too.
Think about that. We go into the courtroom, we argue how bad it was for someone else to drive distracted. We ask the jury to award a ton of money for our client, the family, whatever the case may be. And then we go out and we drive distracted. So, what is that attitude? That attitude is, and I'm sure this is going to resonate with some of your audience, the attitude is, I hate it when I see other people driving distracted.
Yeah.
I mean, those folks, when they're driving near me, especially if I have my kids in the car, my wife, I want them to be paying attention to the road. I want them to be safe. But it's okay when I do it because I'm a really good driver. So, as you know, I've worked with, now it's close to 30 people who've killed while driving distracted.
Wow.
They come to me through court systems to complete the community service part of their sentence, the hours. I just spoke with a man yesterday from Tennessee, and we're going to be working together. And he had killed a mom and dad, and they left 4 children.
Oh my God.
I mean, well, if people work with me though, I want to help them. I want to help them tell their story. I want that story to resonate and maybe give it another reason so people will choose not to drive distracted. And it is a choice to choose not to drive distracted. So I asked them, why did you drive distracted? Why did you drive distracted? And that's why in the presentation we have that slide where we go through the excuses, and I'll just rattle those off now. It was just a few seconds. I'm only looking away for a few seconds. I'm a safe driver. I've never been in a crash.
Yeah.
I'm a really good multitasker. Everybody does it. Some people say they were bored. It was an important text. It was an important call. I was only changing the music. I'm hearing a lot from kids. Probably you're seeing that in your cases as well. So those are the excuses that the people who've killed while driving distracted gave. And I believe it was State Farm Insurance that did a survey, pretty much identical. They surveyed people, why do you drive distracted? How do you rationalize it? So that's the answer, with different excuses, rationalizations. But it's really, it comes down to, I don't think anything bad's going to happen when I do it.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time. It comes up so much with juries, with taking. We did an episode on trampoline parks, and this kind of idea came up the other day too. It's just the idea that it's not going to happen to me. Like, I can drive distracted because nothing bad will happen to me. Like, I'm somehow special or different. I don't need to listen to Tim talk about insurance because I won't be in a car accident or whatever it is. It's just that bias that kind of permeates everything that we do. And it comes up with texting and driving for sure, and other distracted driving. Just that it won't happen to me, so I can do it. So those people that tell me about what it's like working with people, because I've certainly deposed people who have caused bad car accidents, but that a deposition's a lot different than working with somebody and forming a relationship and letting them become an advocate or whatever it is that they're going to be doing. So what has that experience been like for you, and what are those conversations like?
Yeah, it's and again, like you, I had deposed people, occasionally in court, but mostly depositions of people who'd killed while driving distracted. But what we do in the presentation is we ask people just to assume that they're driving. They didn't put their phones on Do Not Disturb while driving, and we can talk about that later. That's just a setting that blocks incoming notifications when the phone senses the car is moving, so we can avoid being tempted. But this particular day, we didn't put it on. We're looking at the road. We look down at a notification. We look up, we look down, and boom, we hit something. And there's a story in the presentation about a 5-year-old kid who was crossing the street in a crosswalk, is hit by a driver.
Little X.
The driver doesn't even realize he's hit a kid because the kid didn't go on the hood of the car, as often pedestrians will when you hit him. He was so little he got sucked under the car and dragged down the road, paralyzed from the neck down. And that could be any of us. And just go back to that 10,000 people a year now. Casey was killed in 2009, so it's 15 years, 10,000 people a year, conservatively. That's 150,000 families mourning. But look at the flip side. That's 150,000 drivers. And do you think your life would ever be the same? All these people I meet, including the one that I talked to just a day or two ago, they've never gotten over it, and they never will. And I'll tell you, Travis, I've had something happen to me now 3 or 4 times over the last couple of months. After I do a presentation at a business, I've had men come up to me, 55, 60 years old. These are mostly trucking company, utility presentations. And they come up to me with tears in their eyes. And they give me a date, 22, 18, 16 years ago. That was the day that they killed someone while driving, and they've never gotten over it.
Golly.
Never gotten over it. And neither would any of us.
No.
And I talked to them about it. What's the worst part of it? And we should think about this, all of us. What's the worst part of it? I want to make it right, and I can't. I can never make it better.
Yeah.
Saying you're sorry just doesn't do it. I want to go back to that day and make a different choice. But these folks can't, and they'll never get over it, and neither would any of us. Never.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, and it's such a powerful message. Like everybody out there listening, who hasn't gone through this yet, who hasn't caused a bad accident yet because of distracted driving, like you have the choice to minimize the chances of you ever causing carnage like this, the carnage that the Feldman family went through, or 150,000 other families have been through since 2009. Like it is a choice. It is yours. Nobody can force you to drive distracted. So take it very, very seriously. And you know, that choice needs to be made by all of us on the roads, to make our roads as safe as possible.
You know, just think about that now. Like distracted driving wasn't a huge thing, as you indicated before, when Casey was killed. People were doing it, but we didn't know about it.
Right. We didn't have a name for it.
So we now know that at least 150,000 drivers have killed other people in our country based upon their choice to drive distracted. So if it was 1,000, if it was 10,000, 20,000, that'd be bad enough. But why should any of us think that given that 150,000 people have driven distracted and killed someone, why should we think when we choose to drive distracted that it's going to be a miracle and it's not going to happen to us? If you do it long enough, it's going to happen to you. And while I've worked with those who've killed distracted drivers, a 17-year-old, a couple of 18, 19-year-olds, I've worked with 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. I think one was 60 maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, if you keep doing it, it's going to catch up to you. It's just a matter of time. You know, if you look at the statistics, you know, I see it. I think one of the reasons why distracted driving, Joel, drives me so crazy is because I have little kids, right? So, drunk driving I see in my practice a lot, but, you can look at the charts on drunk driving, and obviously drunk driving fatalities, huge spikes late at night, past midnight on Friday and Saturday night, or, major holidays and Super Bowls and stuff like that. Distracted driving, pretty much happens morning, noon, and night. And so it is the big dangerous thing happening on the roads when me and my family is on the roads heading to school and things like that. And that's a big message that I give to the high school students. And it's, you know, we now like it's not enough just to do driver's ed anymore. Like the young people especially, I talk about this all the time. You have to learn that driving today requires a hyper state of vigilance all day long. It's not just in the evenings. Like when I was learning how to drive, I was told if you're driving at night, drive extra careful because there's going to be some drunk drivers on the road. Now I tell people like you need to drive extra careful all the time, and it's because of distracted drivers.
Yeah, the dangers on our road. We now know that 29%, a little less than a third of the crashes are due to distracted driving. From 2000,
Probably under.
yeah, that might even be an underestimate as well, but
Yeah,
that's a good estimate. I'm comfortable with 29, 30%,
yeah,
killing more than 10,000 people a year. Traffic crashes in the U.S. have gone up since 2015. And if you compare the United States to other developed countries, we're the worst in terms of overall crashes and fatalities. I think per 100,000 inhabitants, the number for the U.S. is 13 people, 13 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants per year. I think for New Zealand, it's about 7. And then I think for Germany, the UK, France, it's about 4. So about 1/3 as dangerous driving in Europe as it is for driving in the US. Just we we allow it. We allow it.
and what's your hypothesis on why that is, Joel? Is it just a like an individual liberty and freedom thing? Like we don't want government telling us what to do. I mean, we obviously have strict drunk driving laws, and so we have seatbelt laws. I mean, we allow government regulation to some extent inside of our cars. What is it about Americans not wanting? Is it that issue? Is that why you think America is so bad at
Well, it
this?
has a lot to do with speeding. Speeding is a big component as well, and particularly since the pandemic. They noticed that speeding was really off the charts during the pandemic. They thought it was probably a lack of enforcement. I mean, you don't want police officers stopping people, COVID, that sort of thing. Um, but it hasn't really abated, and that's a large part of it. Um, a large part of it is, just again, you mentioned it that, and we mentioned it that we have made drunk driving socially unacceptable. We've personalized it, that drunk driver.
Yeah,
Um, the way people look at distracted driving today is they talk about it as it's being dangerous, it's risky. So, let's put it this way more bluntly. If someone had told me before Casey was killed that what I was doing was dangerous, my reaction, well, I'm a nice guy. I would have said, yeah, you're right. But inside, I'm thinking, maybe it's dangerous when you do it, buddy, but not when I do it because I'm a great driver. But if somebody had said to me, and a lot of people are now saying this, and this is why I'm optimistic, it was selfish. That's different. You can describe my driving, that's one thing. But if you say my driving is selfish, you're not just talking about my driving, you're talking about me as a person, my character, my values. That's what we need to do. And as I said, I'm optimistic people are doing that. We're holding people accountable. That's the change in culture that we need to end distracted driving. I mean, no one wants to be thought of as a selfish person. So I often ask audiences, who here thinks that being that distracted driver that everybody hates to see, even though we drive distracted, we hate to see it, who thinks being that distracted driver is consistent with our own personal values and beliefs?
right. Nobody. And that's powerful, and that's really important. Um, let's talk about parents, right? Because parents are by definition not very selfish people, right? They're giving up their lives for their kids. I mean, everything we do for our children. And so if parents are not selfish people, why do parents drive distracted, even with their kids in their car? Joel. I see it daily.
Well, Travis, let me pick on you for a moment,
Uh
okay?
oh. Uh oh.
And we do this in our
Sorry,
business talks when we have parents.
we're out of time, Joel. I'm just kidding.
Travis, raise your hand and keep it up if you would do anything to keep your children safe. Now keep your hand up, don't put it down. Now only keep your hand up if you haven't driven distracted with your kid in the car.
Uh, yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I know, and I do that in the presentations too. It, it's something that it, until you sit down and think about that choice, it just you go into autopilot behind the wheel. Like you said, these biases kind of come in, even if they're subconscious biases that you're thinking that this won't happen to you and you're a safe driver, and so you're okay to do it every now and then or something like that. Now, certainly since I've started working with you and I've learned about Casey and all that kind of stuff, it's a behavior that I've nipped in the bud. But yeah, before then, for sure, I have done it, and I tell the high school kids this, like, hey guys, circle of trust here. Like, I'm not here to preach at you. I'm not here to yell at you. I've got kids in the car. I know more about distracted driving than any of y'all because of what I do for a living, and I still drove distracted too. So raise your hand if y'all's parents drive distracted, and they all of course raise their hands. But like that's a really important part of the presentation. I think is just getting that level of okay, like he's okay. He's one of us. So we all have this problem in society. So how do we work together to fix it? Is kind of the message there.
Yeah, yeah. Think about that. Your older children are taking it upon themselves to teach your younger children not to drive distracted and making a choice not to drive like mom and dad. Hey, parents, what's going on here? We've abdicated our responsibility. And I bet you each and every one of those parents have told their kids, don't drive distracted when you get your license. Are you driving distracted? Don't drive distracted. No one likes a hypocrite. No one likes a hypocrite. And the facts, the statistics are awful for kids whose parents drive distracted. They're 3 times as likely to drive distracted as their peers if their peers' parents don't drive distracted. So, you think about it. Kids, when they start driving, it's tough. They have inexperience. But add to that the temptation to use our phones, which we all have, and then seeing mom and dad drive distracted, sending a message, even though mom and dad say verbally, don't drive distracted,
Yeah.
it's okay. Mom and dad do it. Mom and dad do it. So it's really hard for the kids. That's why we need to focus on the kids. And uh, having kids tell mom and dad that they're uncomfortable with being driven distracted is really, really powerful. Really powerful.
Yeah, that's huge. And because it's hard for somebody, it's like that old dog new tricks kind of deal, and it's a grown up isn't going to be as receptive to hearing this message, but when they hear it from kids, if the young generation, and this generation's amazing, Joel, you and I have talked about this a lot, like if for anybody who's tried to hire a young person recently, almost to a T, it's like it's not just about hey, how much money am I going to make here, or what are the hours and vacation policy, but it's all about what does this company stand for? Like, what are we going to like? Do I believe in the mission? Am I going to be a valued part of the team? Like they want to change the world for the better. It's a very altruistic generation, and that's the part where I tell them like, let's lean into that on this issue, because if the young generation gets their act together on distracted driving, then they're going to be the change agents because their parents and their people in their circles, they're going to follow suit, right?
Yeah. Let me just interject there. It just popped into my head. Many of us take Uber and Lyft. One thing I would recommend when you get in, and I hope your audience feels comfortable saying this, just when you get in, just say to the driver, you seem like a good person, good guy, good gal, whatever. I just want to let you know that a friend of mine, his daughter was killed by a distracted driver. So it really flipped me out if you'd be looking at your phone while driving.
Oh yeah.
And they don't. And that's a way right then and there to let them know about it.
Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, so let's talk about that. Being a passenger in a car, what do you do if you're sitting there in the front seat or in the back seat and the driver's looking at their phone while driving? Because we've all been in those situations.
Yeah, your first temptation is to say, put your phone down.
Yeah.
To give them an order, put your phone down. You're going to kill us. You're going to cause a crash. What's the matter with you? You nuts? It doesn't work so well. Um, there's interpersonal communication skills, and it comes under the heading of I feel statements. And I'd encourage people to Google it. It's not just for distracted driving. And basically, what that says is if you're in a situation like that, and if you give a command to someone, they're likely to get defensive. Travis, you're going to kill us. Put your phone down. No, Joel, I'm a great driver. I've never been in a crash. Where have I gotten? Nowhere. Travis, hey, I really care about you, but I'm a little uncomfortable when you drive me and look at your phone. I've now just told you how I feel. I haven't asked you to put the phone down. I've communicated to you that something you're doing is causing me concern. And in the context of a caring relationship, guess what? Travis, you're going to put the phone down. And for kids, it's 95% of kids are going to put the phone down if a friend just tells them how they feel about it. Don't confront them. Don't tell them what they're doing is dangerous. Just tell them how you feel about it.
Yeah, it's that simple. Hey,
And you can do that with coworkers. We teach that at businesses a lot. Sometimes people are with their boss and they're a little nervous about it. They can just say that comment, and we don't guarantee it's going to work, but it's a way to at least talk about it.
well, yeah. I mean, if somebody doesn't put their phone down after you have just told them, "Hey, I don't feel safe right now," then then you need to think long and hard about that relationship. In general. So that's powerful. I mean, especially when it comes from like kids. If a kid tells their parent that, like, hey, and I joke with the kids in these presentations, I'm like, just add the three little words to the front of it, and it'll be extra powerful. So, hey, mom, I love you, but I don't feel safe right now. Like, what mom in the world wouldn't drop their phone and just immediately change?
Well, for the parents who are listening, I mean, could you imagine and we're actually, we might get into this, but we have a K-1 distracted driving picture book, and we teach that language to kids. We have a 2nd through 5th grade elementary school distracted driving lesson plan, and we teach those I feel statements. But just as a parent, just imagine you're driving along, your little kid says to you, Mommy, I love you, but I don't feel safe. Or Daddy, I love you, but I don't feel safe when you drive me and look at your phone. God, I mean, it's like a ton of bricks on your chest.
Yeah, yeah. There's a stat that you know your kids are just as persuasive for stuff like this as the law. You know, it's like both of them have like 87% hit rates. And, it's like the thing that keeps people out of jail is just as effective as, hearing from it from their own children. So yeah, kids have a ton of power in this situation.
Yeah, the stat you're talking about came from a National Safety Council survey of 1,000 drivers, 1,000 parents. And I was working with them, and I remember I was pushing them and pushing them and pushing them to put in something like that. They didn't want to at the beginning. And then, well, obviously for my own purposes, because I want to know and I want to use it in talks, but finally they did. And it came up with 87% of parents, I think, or either 78 or 87% said kids are the best deterrent for us driving distracted, tied with strict laws. Yeah.
So strict laws. Let's talk about that. Um, Texas, I imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have most states enacted some kind of law on distracted driving by now? I assume if
They
Texas
have
has, then
in
everyone.
terms of texting.
In terms of texting, okay.
Yeah, I think every state has a law against texting. There's still two or three. Missouri is one that says the cop can't pull you over if they see you texting, but if you're speeding, then they can give you a ticket if they also see you texting. So it's primary enforcement versus secondary enforcement. And there's now 30 states. Pennsylvania, my state, is the most recent state to go to what we call a hands-free only law, but it's just 30 states. But, you think about it. I mean, I'm a big proponent of changing the law, but we have laws against speeding. We have laws against people going through red lights. The enforcement generally is not there. Um, laws are only affect some people and only deter some people. We have to get to the people's heart. That's what we have to get to. We have to get them to self-evaluate themselves, say, what kind of a person I am. And I've, gone head to head. I mean, I'm not confrontational, but people who are adamant adamant distracted drivers, great drivers, and just going through this personal thing, this respect for of other people, this selfless versus selfish. And, it's working. It's working. I mean, I have to learn how to do it better myself. It's a process, but it's working. It's working. But enforcement is so important. I mean, I think, I'm not sure if it's Texas or Florida, more people are killed each year than any other state. I think it's Texas.
It's probably Texas. Joel, Texas has something. There's this campaign that TxDOT is doing called End the Streak. All right, I think I don't know if I've told you this or not, but and I was just looking on my phone to confirm this date, but it's been since November 7th of. Are you ready for this? 2000. Since we haven't had somebody die on our roads in Texas. That's 24 years.
Yeah.
I don't even know if Bush had gotten into office yet in November 2000. That's how insane is that?
Yeah. I remember seeing something like that, hoping they could have one day where a Texan or a visitor to your state did not.
We haven't had one
die.
day, and it's kind of getting to the point where it's kind of gimmicky. I mean, if 0 people died on the roads tomorrow, that would be great. But then 5 people died the next day. So we're not fixing the problem. Just if we ever do happen to end that streak, but it's just kind of a point that this issue it's right here in Texas. It's right here pretty much everywhere. The fine in Texas if you get caught for the first time, texting and driving. You want to guess?
$25.
$25. Have
Yeah,
you seen that before? So yeah, Joel, in Texas right now we're $25 fine, $25 to $99 first time offense. What states, like if a state like really wanted to take this seriously, like what states have done a good job on this, and what do those laws look like?
I know that Alaska has $1,000 fine for texting and driving. I believe Utah has a $750 fine, but those are the aberrations. There's some states that'll assess points, but most don't for the first infraction. Of course, unless you kill somebody, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What we've talked about earlier is the hands-free laws. And basically that says that you can use your phone while driving, but it has to be an amount or connected to through the infotainment system, CarPlay or whatever. And to initiate something or to receive a call, to make a call, you can a button, one touch or a swipe. That's pretty much how the laws work. And so they've enacted those laws. Pennsylvania is the 30th state. It actually goes into effect in a month or so. But the first year, they're not going to assess any penalties. They're just going to give warnings and educate people. They've done studies on Ohio, Georgia, and one other state that have adopted those laws more recently, and they're finding that they reduce crashes by anywhere from 5 to 10% once the law is enacted. For the first 90 days, it's at the high end of that 10%. And then after the first 90 days, when it's not in the press and there's not high visibility enforcement, it may go down a little bit. So it's helping. But as I said earlier, it's not enough. People have to take it upon themselves. I had this kid. I'm really skipping around here, but I had this kid who saw my presentation. He was a film student. He was going to go on to Columbia in New York City. Go on to film. He said, "Can I make a video for you?" And he made this little video, and I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's the nursery rhyme one. So basically, it starts out showing little kids in school playing together, cooperating, being really nice, and they talk about the golden rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And then they take it to the harsh reality of people, 90% of people say that distracted driving is very dangerous or dangerous, yet 50 to 60% of those people do it anyway. And then they come back to the nursery kids playing together, and they say it's a value, treat other people the way you want to be treated, the golden rule, that we teach little kids, but we somehow lose track of it. And you think about it. We know how we want to be treated on the road by the people we share the road with. We want them to pay attention. We want them to do everything they can so that we get home safely to our loved ones. Why can't we do the same for them, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm optimistic. I don't want anyone listening to this thinking I'm not optimistic. I am optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be in Texas January, Midland and Odessa, doing some company talks.
Oh, okay, cool. Um, yeah, like I told you earlier, Joel will go anywhere. He's all over the place. So what about okay? So if you're on the roads, I think my answer to this question has changed over the years. What do you do, Joel, if you were driving on the road and you see a distracted driver, like somebody in another car?
I will admit, in the past,
Yeah,
that I would honk my horn and maybe
me
give
too.
an obscene gesture.
Yeah,
I will admit that. I don't do that anymore.
yeah,
People are crazy on the roads.
yeah.
People have guns. There's road rage incidents are increasing. And I particularly tell the kids, if someone cuts you off, someone is distracted driving or something, let them go in front of you. They can't cause you any harm if they're in front of you. Do not honk the horn. Don't make eye contact with them because they'll follow you home. People are nuts today. So just let them get in front of me. Oftentimes, like I look at speed limits differently. And I say, I used to look at speed limits perhaps as maybe you and your audience has done. Hey, it's a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit. I can go 70 or 72 and I won't get a ticket, right? After speaking with a whole bunch of engineers, I went to a conference. There were a bunch of engineers, and a lot of it was way over my head. But the one thing I took away from this conference was there's a concerted effort by folks to build into the speed limit a margin of safety, a margin of error. And that means that if you go the speed limit, you got a shot at avoiding a crash if something unforeseen happens.
Right.
Conversely, if you go over the speed limit, you've thrown that margin of safety, that margin of error out the window. So I stress that a lot to kids as well. And then we talked about it earlier, and I don't know if we'll have time, but defensive driving is so very, very important.
Yeah. No, we've got plenty of time. Let's talk about defensive driving. I mean, because that's an important part of this message is you can't drive distracted because so many other people on the road are driving distracted. So it takes more from you. I tell this to high school students right now. Like you can't drive distracted because everyone else is. Not everybody, but you get the point. But and when I learned how to drive, distracted driving was kind of like the extra credit question on the driving test. It wasn't a big part of it. But now, defensive driving, Joel, it just seems like that's the name of the game.
Yeah. So I think, being a trial lawyer like you, stories, I think, convey the message. I do talks with a man. I actually haven't done talks with him in a little while, but I did a bunch of talks with him. He would come in and he would talk about how he was driving. He had his son in the front seat. He had the green light, and a distracted driver came through the red light driving a small truck, slammed into the passenger side of his car and killed his son. And he would come in and tell that story. Powerful story. We did it a bunch of times. Then he called me on the phone. He said, I have to apologize to you. And I said, why? He said, I haven't been exactly straight with you about the crash. And I said, well, no, I looked at the police report before I'm going to talk. I look at the police report and make sure what it says, the crash report. And he said, well, at the time that distracted driver killed my son, and I had the green light, I wasn't looking at the road. I was also looking at my phone. And then he said to me something that I will never forget. I had the last best chance to save my son's life, and I blew it because I was looking at my phone, and I have to live with that.
Right.
When we're driving and we have people in the car with us, it might be a coworker, but more often than not, it's the people who are the most important people in the world to us. How could we possibly do anything less than devote our full attention to the road and, as you said, be so aware of all the crazy people out there? A distracted driver can't be a defensive driver. We owe it to our family. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our loved ones.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been in those scenarios. If you drive long enough, you're gonna be in situations where people are gonna run a red light, run a stop sign. They're gonna cross over, the median, the little paint. I've had that situation. I actually have that shot on a dash cam on my old car. I had a dash camera and took a picture of it. I was going around this sharp turn in this country road, and the person coming the other way just hit that turn late and was drifting into my lane. And we were both going 50, 55 miles an hour. I had the right of way, Joel. Like, my family would have won that lawsuit, but
Yeah.
I don't care. You got to give yourself an out as much as you can. And like you said, if you're looking at your phone or dinking around with something, you can't be in that state where you are predicting those threats and setting up a game plan for what are you going to do? What are you going to do if this person crosses the line? What are you going to do if the person runs that stop sign? You got to give yourself an out, and it is physically impossible to do that if you're staring at your cell phone.
So a lot of companies where I work, they've had defensive driving um, courses, and one big one is Smith's Rules for Safe Driving. And actually, I've used that in cases when I've had a defendant truck driver just to see if they were obeying what they had learned in a course. But basically, it says aim high, get a big picture, constantly scan the road, make sure that you're seen, and leave yourself an out. So let's just think about this practically. When we're stopped and we're the first car at a red light and the light turns green, we don't go. We look to our left, we look to our right, and make sure somebody's not trying to run the light, which people do. If we see kids near on the side of the road, even though we as the motorists have the right of way and they should wait at an intersection, we assume that they're going to cross in front of us.
Yeah.
We make predictions about what people will do wrong. We don't trust people. We have the green light. We're going through an intersection. We slow down. We're constantly looking to the left, look to the right to make sure that person isn't on their phone and going to pay attention. Merging. You're on the main highway. People merge in. They're supposed to yield to you. We don't assume that they're going to yield. We move over a lane if we can, or we slow down, let them get in front of us. And I think one thing, too, is let's say it's going to take you half an hour to get someplace. I think if you can leave yourself 5 extra minutes, I think it takes away some of that anxiety about being late, wanting to speed, wanting to go a little faster, just to take a couple extra minutes. And again, as we said earlier, if you're using your GPS, program it when you're stopped. It could be the most dangerous thing a driver can do in terms of distraction, programming a GPS while driving.
Yeah. There is like an affirmative defense in Texas to this the distracted driving statute, and I forgot what it is, but it's either they allow an out for actively using it for navigation or for music. I can't remember. It's one of those two. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, why would you put this in here? Because that is just as distracting as anything else you're doing while you're looking at your phone.
Yeah, the other thing in terms of defensive driving is following distance. Most crashes, probably in your practice, you see this, most crashes are rear end collisions. And that's because the person behind was following too closely. Now, it could be that the person pulled out in front of them, the person slammed on their brakes, but if you have enough following distance, you can generally avoid those crashes. And a lot of folks will use the 3-second rule. You're following a vehicle, and let's say they're in front of you and they pass a utility pole, a building, something that's a fixed object on the side of the road. When they're passing it, you start counting 1001, 1002, 1003. And if you don't get to the same location before you finish saying 3, there's enough following distance. If you're closer to that and you don't get to 3, then you're too close and you slow down a little bit and leave some room. But, we have to take it upon ourselves to be those safe drivers. We have to take it upon ourselves to protect our family, those that we love, because there's so many people out there who are driving selfishly or driving irresponsibly and driving in a manner that, quite frankly, indicates that they don't really care about the people they share the road with. And I used to be one of those people. I don't want to sound too high and mighty. I used to be one of those people. I was a selfish driver, and I was also a lucky driver.
Right.
And you think about this. Many of us will equate the lack of tickets and lack of crashes with being safe drivers. There's a difference between being that safe driver and lucky driver. And there's certainly a difference between being selfless and a selfish driver.
If I get drunk at the bar and I drive home and I don't kill somebody, it's not because I was being safe. It's because I got lucky. Same thing if you're going 100 miles an hour in a 40. If you don't kill somebody, you weren't being safe. You just got lucky. If you stare at your phone while you're driving and you get home safe, or you get home without killing somebody, it does not mean you were safe. It just means you got lucky that once. But if you keep doing that, if you keep driving drunk or keep speeding over and over again, or you keep staring at your phone while you're driving, it's just a matter of time. This is going to catch up to you.
I'd asked my son about that because, unlike me, he is a statistics guy. And I said, how do I explain this to audiences? He said, Dad, I'll make it simple for you, as he always has to say. Take a period of time, a year. If you're doing something that you appreciate has a little bit of risk, if nothing bad happens for the first 6 months and you continue doing that activity, well, clearly the likelihood that it's going to happen is increased over that fixed period of time, whether it's a year or 5 years. And that kind of makes sense, It's going to happen to us, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. It's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. What tools have you seen, Joel, to help on this issue? I mean, I have, obviously the do not disturb while driving feature. You see that some people have that turned on. I have it turned on my phone. My wife has it turned on, and I tell kids I love that feature. I mean, not only does it help me not drive distracted, but it's just kind of nice because it just stops my phone from dinging. Which people get so tired of hearing the dings on their phones all day. It's like a little robot that works for me. It's texting people for me, so I don't have to do that. And I tell young people, like, if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend who's constantly wondering where you are, this thing's going to send a message for you saying, hey, I'm driving right now. Like, leave me alone. So it's got a lot of good features. I mean, I love it when I get a text message from my wife and it's the do not disturb while driving automated text message. It just honestly just makes me smile because I know my wife is driving her car and she's not looking at her phone. Like, she's doing everything she can to get home safely to me and the kids. And that is everything to me. And so it's something that I just tell people, like, it is a great feature on your phone. I think Androids have them too now. iPhones have them. They're very easy to turn on. You set it and forget it. And so I know you love that tool as well. Are there any other tools out there? Like, could a parent, have you seen anything where a parent can set this for their kids, or like have some kind of app or feature where their kids can't be on their phones while they're driving?
Yeah, let's talk about do not disturb while driving for a moment. You have the iPhone, the Android, the Google. The U.S. National Distracted Driving Coalition is a website, USNDDC. You have to put in U.S. or you'll get the Canada one. We had in October, we had a Do Not Disturb While Driving Day, the third annual one. And each year, more and more people are using Do Not Disturb While Driving. No matter what phone you have, there'll be a video on there and you can figure out how to put Do Not Disturb While Driving on. So that's a big part of it. If you would text me or call me when I'm driving, and I should say I have some exceptions to it. I don't talk about this with the kids. Well, I do a little bit, but we don't want you to have your whole contact list being an exception. An exception is something that even if you have it set, it'll still come through. What we suggest is maybe your spouse, your boss, if that's the kind of thing. Don't have your whole contact list, but we need to know certain things. So if my wife or son calls me or texts me, I will see it come in on the infotainment system on the screen. I don't pick it up. What I'll do is I'll pull over to the side of the road if I think I need to. But that way I know about it and I'm not worried, what's going on with them. I don't need to hear from my law partners. I don't need to hear from other people. I don't want to hear from judges and things. I just, want to be safe. And the other part of it is, as you said, Travis, you look at the response when you texted your wife and it says, hey, I'm driving. It's not safe. When I stop, I'll get back to you. It made you feel good. That also sends a message to other people who may not be aware of Do Not Disturb while driving. Because the reality is, if you don't have it on and a notification comes in, whether you're going to pick up your phone and look at it, or you're going to look at it on the infotainment system if you're hooked up that way, you're going to do it. And just think about this. Do you want the person in the car next to you, when you're driving your kids, your spouse, people most important in the world to you, do you want them focused totally on the road, or do you want them to be having, even if it's with voice and that kind of stuff, do you want to be having conversations with other people, or do you want them to be focused totally on the road? And I know what the answer is, so let's just do the same for other people. Let's do the same for other people. There's also an app called Life 360. It's free, I think, unless you want some type of a report. But a lot of parents will have that. You and your kids will go into that app. You'll all have it. They'll be able to see where you are. They'll be able to see if your car is stopped, if it's driving. And that makes parents feel a lot better, because if you're worried about your kid and you look at the app and you see they're driving along, chances are they're okay, right? And then if you want to text them or call them, you know, hey, I'm not going to do it now. And that's a conversation you need to have with your kids, because, yeah, as parents, we're deathly afraid. I guess I shouldn't use that. But yeah, well, we are deathly afraid of our kids driving, distracted driving, that kind of stuff. So you want to know that they're safe. But I've done talks with moms and dads who they were the last text that their kid tried to read before they were killed. And you don't want to be pushing them to respond to tell you that they're safe. You could work that out. What we suggest is that kids, if they're driving, let's say they drive to school, they send a text, hey, mom, dad, I'm safe at school. I'll let you know when I'm leaving. And let the kid initiate it. And then with the Life 360 app, you can see where they are. That's a much better way to do it.
So don't text message people if you know they're driving, especially your kids. What about calls, Joel? Should people, if you know someone's driving, should you call them, or should you wait till they arrive at their destination?
So here's a tough issue, quite honestly. Hands-free calls. A lot of people say, and well, 30 states basically have said, hey, it's fine if you want to have a hands-free call. But is it safe? And all the studies keep coming back and saying, it's safer, of course, than looking away from the road at a text, but it still causes us to lose concentration. And there's some studies, that we have this in the presentation. Basically, what it comes down to is driving is cognitively demanding.
Right.
Many of us really don't even think about it, because we're kind of on autopilot when we drive. We're so used to it, but our brains aren't. Our brains are paying attention, doing things, and we may not even be aware of it. When we add another cognitively demanding task, in this case, a conversation with someone remote from the vehicle, a hands-free phone call, it adds another level of cognitive load or cognitive demand. And in many cases, our brain gets overloaded and we shut down scanning. We have no control over it. We don't scan the road. So what I tell people is, just know, don't stay on hands-free calls forever. If someone calls you hands-free, your wife or your spouse or partner, whatever it is, click it. Hey, what's up? Okay, you want me to get some milk? Fine, I'm cutting off the call because it's not safe. Boom. Short, sweet, that kind of thing. People just tend to hang on those calls, those hands-free calls forever. Now, the question that ordinarily comes up now is, okay, so can you talk to a passenger in the car? And actually, you can. They've found that conversations with folks in the car, for some reason, are not that cognitively demanding, and they're not that distracting with the driver. It's just when it's remote.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense, because that person in the car can sense what's going on the roadway. Like, that person can stop talking if like traffic backs up or people are getting on their brakes, and so it's a different scenario. But yeah, I try my best to not call like my wife. I can see if she's driving, and so I just don't try not to call her if she's driving. It's just one more thing. It's it's obviously it's not as dangerous as staring at your phone, texting and driving, social, all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't help anything. Um, okay, I want to talk about a couple more things before we go, Joel. Kids, what advice do you have? So, I've got little kids. Like, I joke, I got kids of all the ages, but I've got an 8 and a 6 and a 4, and then we have a baby as well. So, what advice do you have for parents of little kids on this issue? Because, um, they're not driving yet, but they're going to be in cars with other people besides me and their mom. So when you talk to kids, what's kind of the message that you give them?
Well, clearly, we should not wait until kids are about to get their driver's license to talk to them about distracted driving. And I think parents should know that the studies show kids as young as 5 or 6 are watching us drive.
Oh yeah,
And if we drive distracted, they're going to drive distracted. So part of the lesson needs to be the driver you want your kid to be all the time. I have a, a volunteer speaker in the Pittsburgh area. Good guy. He's a lawyer. Good guy. He called me, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 months ago, and he said, Joel, I have to tell you something that's really embarrassing. I said, all right, Jason, what's up? He said, we got our, I don't know, 4 or 5 year old little kid. It's a Little Tykes is the manufacturer, a red and yellow domed car that all the kids have. You're nodding your head. Okay. Probably your audience will recognize it as well. He said, we got our son that, and he had a tantrum. He wouldn't drive it unless he had my cell phone. He wanted to drive just like daddy.
oh gosh, oh man,
That should give us, that's what we need to know. That's what we need to know.
yeah,
Our kids are learning from us. Um, uh, but we also have, as I talked about, I just grabbed it. I don't know how well this is going to come across, but we have this K through 2 distracted driving picture book, Sam's Trip to the Beach. I talked about a 2nd to 5th grade thing. We need to create a generation of kids who will choose not to drive distracted when they get their licenses. We can't wait until they're about to drive distracted. And there are resources out there. We have a bunch. Other people have that. So that's what we need to do. If you asked any parent what's the most dangerous thing their kid would do, chances are they're going to say get in the car with another teen driver or drive themselves. And that's what the facts show. That's what the facts show. So we need to be taking a more proactive role. But please, 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 I'd hope that you'd give up your driving distractions when you drive all the time, but at a minimum, when your kids are in the car. You expose them to being in a crash because you're not driving defensively, and you're teaching them it's okay to drive distracted. We can't have that.
yeah.
As parents, we can and must do better.
Yeah, I think any parent knows that a kid's going to do what you do before they do what you say to do. They're going to model that behavior. And I also tell my kids, like, if you're in another person's car, like for a carpool or something, if Mrs. Smith is taking you to basketball and she's staring at her phone while driving, it is okay to speak up and say, like, hey, ma'am, I don't feel safe right now, like you've taught me to do, Joel. B, let daddy know about it so I can deal with that information. You don't want a kid afraid to speak up and afraid to talk to you about that, because we're just not going to take those chances with our kids.
And I think also, I talk to the kids. I do a lot of driver's ed classes. So some have their permits, some don't, but they're not driving alone. And I talk to them about defensive driving. And I say, you can practice being a defensive driver just by sitting in the front seat with your mom and dad. As they're going through an intersection, are they slowing down even if they have the green light? Are they looking for left to right? And I think parents can start teaching their kids about how to be defensive drivers early on, saying, I'm coming to this intersection. I have the green light. That means I can go, but I'm looking. Is that person going to come through the light? You can start teaching your kids at an early age about that. And I think it's really important to teach them how to drive defensively. And they could learn so much before they even get close to being a driver. But I think you're right. We have to embolden, empower might be a better word, our children, that if Mrs. Smith is driving them and she's looking at her phone respectfully, and you have to be respectful, I just don't feel safe when you drive me and look at your phone. And I bet you that mom is going to feel mortified.
Oh,
that
yeah.
dad will feel mortified.
Yeah, but it'll change that behavior. Going back to driver's ed, what you just mentioned, are they doing? Do they do a lot of distracted driving stuff in driver's ed now? Or because when I talk to high school students, it seems like a lot of this. It's like the first time they've heard it.
Yeah, it is unfortunately the first time they've heard it.
Which is crazy to me. It seems
And
like that should
even
be all
with
over driver's ed.
defensive driving too,
Yeah.
which is shocking. I mean, how do kids go through driver's ed and not learn defensive driving, distracted driving? Well, the resources are so limited. They only can do so much in the classroom. The driving time, if schools still have the ability for the kids to drive. I do a lot of work in Delaware, and every school still has cars. As a matter of fact, the only people who can certify someone under the age of 18 eligible to take their driver's test is a driver's ed instructor at a school. Mom and dad can't do that certification. Now, if you're older, you can do it differently, which I think is neat. And statistics show that while we're well-intended moms and dads teaching our kids about driving, the kids who go through driver's ed or private driving schools are safer. They have less crashes.
For the private driving schools?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for, regular driver's ed, I think that's an important message for parents to keep in mind. Like, don't think that your kids are safe just because they successfully pass that course. A lot of kids will do whatever it takes to get that checkbox, get their license, but they're not adequate. They're not coming out adequately trained on distracted driving. So it takes parents getting them this kind of information, sitting down with them and talking to them about it. Joel, I think, you and I have talked about this too. The presentation that we do in these schools, I'm going to try to put one of those online so someone can just come. If they can't get to one of these in-person presentations, they can just watch it online and get all the stuff that you've put together completely free. I think that'd be really powerful and an easy way for parents to get this in the hands of their kids, and also for the parents to watch it themselves. Like you said, this isn't just about talking. This isn't just a young person issue. We see this at all age groups.
Well, I think folks that are listening to this, if they're in your area, they should reach out to you and see if you can come in and talk with the kids in their school. If they have companies, they should have you come in and talk with the folks in the company, because we do have the K-1 picture book, the elementary school. I'm going to be going to Wisconsin next week. I've done middle school presentations in the past, quite honestly, not a lot, maybe only about a dozen, but we've worked on that presentation. I had an advisory group of middle school kids working with me on it. And cool. I'm going to be in Wisconsin next week talking to middle school kids and high school kids. So
yeah,
they should have you come in and do talks.
Well, you've got 125 of us. So really anybody across the country, if you want someone to come in, whether it's to your business, whether it's to your conference, to your high school, if you've got a group of people that you can get together and you want to get this message to them, Joel will make sure someone comes and delivers that message, and it will save lives. Period. End of story. Right, Joel?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, Joel, this has been fantastic. I love talking to you. I love what you're doing. I'm honored to be a very small part of it, and I can't wait. The other thing too is just talking to young people, and it's a lot of fun. Like it's a very serious message, but there's so much energy, and I love it. And so it's just been fun getting to know you and being a part of this. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Is there anything else, Joel, if they want to reach out to you to get a presentation or anything like that, how can people find you?
Oh, pretty simple. The organization is enddistracteddriving.org, for short, enddd.org. And you can find me there. It's info@enddd.org. Let me just finish with this one, Travis. There's a video we use, and I'm sure you know it. It's the one with my wife in it. And she talks about Casey and all. And she just asked this question. And it's in a mixture of grief, frustration, probably anger. What will it take for us to change the way we drive? That's a question that each and every one of us can answer. And if you've listened to this, you now know the answer. It's making your personal values congruent with your driving behaviors, or maybe making your driving behaviors congruent with your personal values. It's being that good role model for your children. It's, recognizing that you share something with everybody on the road. You have something in common with everybody. Every single person you see. They want to get home safely, and they've got people at home who love them and want them to get home safely. And we need to do this, and we can do this. We can do this.
Yeah, and we're all in this together. Awesome, Joel. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Hey there, listeners. I hope today's episode has been enlightening and inspiring. As we dive into these important conversations about safety and community, I'm reminded of why I became a personal injury lawyer in the first place. Every day, I see people whose lives have been turned upside down because of some accident in one shape or form or another. It's a confusing, overwhelming time, and it can feel impossible to know where to turn. If you or someone you love have been in an accident and you need honest guidance, visit pattersonpersonalinjury.com to schedule a free consultation with our team. We'll get to know you, we'll get to know your story, we're going to answer your questions, and we're going to help you understand all of your options, all with no obligation and no pressure. At Patterson Law Group, we've helped thousands of people rebuild their lives and find closure with honesty, transparency, and integrity. You deserve an advocate who will fight for your rights and for your future. So don't wait. Visit pattersonpersonalinjury.com today, and let's start driving change in your own life.